Crowds of Israelis once again took to the streets, demanding a ceasefire deal that would free the remaining hostages held in Gaza, after Israel's forces said they had recovered the bodies of 6 killed by Hamas. Near Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's residence, some argued that the government could and should have secured their release.
We found out that another 6 hostages were murdered cruelly only recently, which shows or proves that the government could have saved them.
We're grieving the death of 6 hostages. They should have come back alive. They could have come back alive. We need a deal now.
Among the victims was Almog Sarusi, who was at the Nova Festival when Hamas launched their attack on the 7th of October. During his funeral on Sunday, his family and friends were inconsolable.
We love you, and you will stay in our hearts.
Netanyahu responded to the deaths, vowing to eliminate Hamas.
To Hamas terrorists who murdered our hostages and to their leaders, you are dead men. We will not rest until we track you down. We will get you and will settle our score.
Meanwhile, opposition leader Yair Lapid and a powerful Israeli trade union called on Sunday for a general strike, ramping up pressure on Netanyahu's government to come to an agreement.
Let's cross Jerusalem. Let's bring in Irris Makler, our correspondent there. Irris, just great to have you on the programme this evening. Bring us up to date. The latest you're hearing from what happened this morning with the hostages.
What we're hearing is that Israel's medical examiner conducted autopsies on the bodies, and they say that the 6 were executed at close range. I've seen some reports saying actually shot in the head. Within the last 48 to 72 hours, they're placing the time of death something late night Thursday, early morning Friday. So that's been a shock to the populace of Israel, because there were relatives of the hostages who went down to the Gaza border on Thursday night calling out to their loved ones, hoping they could hear them, and perhaps they could have heard them then, but by that nightfall they couldn't have heard them any longer because they were dead. There are also reports that 4 of the 6, that is 2 women and the 2 women and the 2 wounded men, would have been on a list of the first phase of hostages to be released had there been a ceasefire deal and a hostage and prisoner exchange. So all of those things together are making people here it's a mixture of grief and fury, and that last detail really just adds or rubs salt into the wound. The IDF spokesperson said they were found in a tunnel near Rafah, about 1 kilometre from where the Bedouin citizen of Israel was rescued last week, and both times they didn't have intelligence and find them on purpose. They stumbled upon them. In his case, it was a good result. In the case of these 6 young people, it was a bad result.
We've been showing live pictures as we speak to you from those protests in Tel Aviv. I want to talk to you about that. Let's first hear from Benjamin Netanyahu after the announcement of those bodies being found today.
To Hamas terrorists who murdered our hostages and to their leaders, you are dead men. We will not rest until we track you down. We will get you and will settle our score.
So we've heard, Irris, from Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli leader. We've heard also from Joe Biden. Joe Biden, the American president, saying that he personally knew the family of Hirsch, the Israeli-American hostage. Tell us about that, what Joe Biden had to say, and tell us also about, you've been to those protests today, what the atmosphere is like there.
In addition to the protests that we're seeing across the country, some in Jerusalem, I had to leave one to come to be able to stand here because there were too many people. I couldn't broadcast from there. There are protests in many cities across the country. There's a sense of grief across the country. And we heard from, for example, President Joe Biden, the US president, who was very upset because he knew the mother of one of those 6 who were killed, Hirsch Goldberg Polin. I think she's become an international figure, an ordinary woman who's catapulted into the spotlight, and you see that she's not ordinary at all. And he said that obviously Hamas is to blame for this. Now we know it appears to be an execution of the 6. But in fact, what Israelis are asking is what share of that blame does their own government take? Because it hasn't negotiated a hostage deal. It hasn't negotiated a ceasefire. They say there were opportunities. There have been many who say that there have been opportunities, and that's from Israel's security and military services. So now we hear from the opposition leader, who's a known opponent of Benjamin Netanyahu, that really he has this Netanyahu, and I quote, the government of death, refused to save these hostages. Netanyahu, of course, denies that. He says security is paramount. But this is a festering issue here, the thought that perhaps they could have been saved, and the suggestion that Israel's government is not doing all it can to reach a deal on that issue.
So we've had a statement from the campaign group, the Hostages and Missing Families Forum, saying, quote, a negotiated deal for the return of hostages is urgently needed. Quote, were it not for delays, sabotage and excuses and months of mediation efforts, the 6 hostages, they say, would likely be still alive. And so, calling for this nationwide general strike. So too, some of the powerful trade unions. Tell us when that could happen, what that could look like.
I'm finding it very hard to hear you, so I hope you've asked me about the West Bank and what is happening there. If you have, I will just tell you that it's now the 4th day of an Israeli military action in the north of the West Bank, in the city of Jenin. There have also been 2 attempted militant actions by Palestinians near the town of Hebron in the south of the West Bank yesterday, and there's been an Israeli military action there today because there has been a shooting of 3 Israeli policemen near that town. So we've seen an explosion, really, you could say, or certainly an escalation that wasn't present for the first 9 months or so, but we are now seeing that in the West Bank as well.
Great to hear from you, Irris Makler, our correspondent in Jerusalem. Just to update you on that strike.